good morning to you. Tuesdays are special here on Times Radio. We have our leaders panel. It's the former Conservative leader William Hague and the former Scottish Labour leader Kezia Dugdale. They're going to give us their experience of being at the sharp end of politics. Morning to you, Kezia. You're in the studio with us.
Good morning.
You're suffering with the London weather. It's very hot.
It's too hot to work.
Well, that's what we think.
We always say that. Can we do this programme outside?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's take our computers outside, shall we, onto the grass. And William Hague, good morning to you, William.
Good morning.
How is the weather where you are?
Well, since I'm about 3 miles from where you are, it's very, very similar. Actually, yes. No, I'm sitting in my Westminster home.
Okay, we won't take it personally that you didn't come into the studio. We won't.
Kezia came from Fife.
Yes.
I'm just saying. And there's air conditioning here, William, as well. So as the weather heats up, then maybe we can lure you in.
Yeah.
Well, you let me know when Kezia is coming in next time, and I'll be right there.
Oh, that's a promise. He said it on air.
Is that a promise or a pledge?
It's a date.
And what a date that would be.
Oh, my goodness.
We were going to ask them about their reactions on Julian Assange's plea deal and why the Minister for Countering Illegal Migration, Michael Tomlinson, found it so hard to give his opinion on that when we asked him this morning.
Rishi Sunak told the audience at the Sun's Leader event last night that migrants were queuing up at Calais in the hopes of a Labour government. Is he finally following the advice of his critics and going for the jugular?
And where do stupid questions get you? I don't think this is a stupid question, actually. When Rishi Sunak was asked what is his favourite TV programme, he actually said Bridgerton. He actually said, I'm always in awe at the talent that we have in this country, and fantastic period dramas like Bridgerton showcase why this country stands as a creative industry superpower. Was that a prepared answer, do we think? Who could possibly tell?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Let's move on now. Should we talk about Julian Assange first of all? It's quite complicated, really. His supporters will tell you that he released thousands of American government documents to draw attention to the country's rotten foreign policy. His detractors say that he recklessly gave up secrets that put American agents at risk. His supporters say he was forced to hide in the Ecuadorian embassy to prevent extradition and life imprisonment in America. His detractors say he was trying to avoid a rape charge in Sweden. Now, the man himself is about to plead guilty to a charge of espionage, but that will allow him to finally go free and be with his family. He's going to live in Australia. It was too complicated for the illegal immigration minister, Michael Tomlinson, when we asked him if justice had been done for Assange.
Well, Dick, thank you. That's the breaking news overnight. We're going to have to take time to reflect on that, and I'm sure in the fullness of time, there will be a response to that. But that is the breaking news, and it looks like that is the process that's in train.
William Hague, are you able to respond to the breaking news?
Yes, well, I'm not constrained by being a minister. I think it's a good thing overall that this long saga is coming to an end, and the Australian government has clearly done a lot of work. He's their citizen. And they've done a lot of work to try to sort it all out. I can't see him as any kind of hero, though, I'm afraid. This is a man who did leak national security secrets of the free societies he's always taken advantage of, and then was wanted on separate charges in Sweden, and then fled into the Ecuadorian embassy, where after a few years they wondered how on earth they were going to get him out. And so, he's not somebody you want around. And so I don't see him as any kind of hero, but he's pleading guilty in a plea bargain. He has been years unable or unwilling to exercise his freedom. So let's hope this is an end to this whole miserable saga.
Kezia Dugdale, did he do any good?
No, I don't think so. I think most of all, this is a story now about a 14-year saga that's come to an end. I think that's a really positive thing. I think it's important that he has pleaded guilty. Yes, it's a plea bargain. It's just to one charge, and he's arguably, set for a lot more than that. It is an admission. That's important. Lives were, I think, put at risk. I do recognise, though, the separate arguments around freedom of speech and protest, and he was doing the world a service by revealing some of these facts about what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think the most interesting thing about the development overnight in this breaking news story is the quiet diplomacy of the Australian government, actually. It looks like this has been a persistent issue for Albanese, and he secured his release, and that's pretty impressive.
Andrew Neil was making the point that what he did, he shone a light on what the Americans might have been doing, but that he should have been a bit more diligent in terms of protecting people, if he had done that in terms of the information that was released, would you been more of a supporter?
I think that's right. I mean, it's an incredibly difficult moral dilemma, right? To trade off arguments around free speech against whether or not you're jeopardising the lives of US armed force members. So I don't think it's clear cut. It's one of those sort of 51, 49% issues. But if what had happened in the way that you described it had, then of course I would be more predisposed to his opinion.
Now, Michael Tomlinson was on to talk about, well, he's the illegal migration minister, and he was on to talk about that subject. In the debate last night, the Sun's debate between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, William Hague, Rishi Sunak came out fighting, we thought, really, when it came to what a Labour government might mean in terms of migrants, illegal migrants who are apparently queuing in Calais, waiting for this to happen, should it happen. Is this Rishi Sunak finally going for the jugular?
Well, I hope so. Yeah, I mean, and it's good that after all the things that have been, all the mishaps and difficulties in the campaign, you've got to hand it to him that he still has fighting spirit at this stage. And this is an important issue of difference between the parties. All governments are going to have a great problem, whoever it is, with small boats, with illegal migration. But I think that problem would be bigger if there's a Labour government next month. They're going to have a problem. They don't have any deterrent against that type of illegal migration. They've no plan to reform the European Convention on Human Rights. They will be seen as defenceless on this. And of course, they say they will try to smash criminal gangs, but that's exactly what the UK has been trying to do, and the French government has been trying to do for a long time. That's no difference of policy. So I would expect, if the Labour are elected at the end of next week, they will have quite a migration crisis going on in the course of July and August, particularly if there's good weather in the Channel.
But that's the point, isn't it? That Rishi Sunak's chosen to have an election in the height of summer. So every single day there will be hundreds of people crossing the Channel. There were 800 yesterday. The record in 2024 is higher than in 2023, higher than in 2022. He has been in power for those 2 years. There may well be an argument, we'll talk to Kezia about that Labour don't have many answers either. But as the incumbent, Rishi Sunak is going to be judged on his record when it comes to small boats. And the record is, he had a long policy about getting him off to Rwanda, which was blocked and blocked and blocked, and then can't happen, if it will ever happen, until after the election. Meanwhile, the people are coming across in very dangerous circumstances over the Channel. Every single day there will be a judgment on Rishi Sunak when people try and cross that water. That's probably a bigger problem for him, isn't it, than it is for Keir Starmer?
It is, of course, it is a big problem for him. And additionally, that legal migration has been very high since Brexit, although everybody expects that what the government's already announced on that will cut it by half over the next year. But definitely it is a big problem for any incumbent government. I'm only really saying it was going to be a bigger problem if the government that comes in doesn't really have any proposal to deter it or to reform this in the future. So you might think that's an unpalatable choice. You've got a government that definitely has struggled with this to get a new policy through the courts, through the House of Lords, and so on. Or you've got a new government that doesn't even have that policy at all. So maybe that's not a great choice, but illegal migration will be worse if the Labour government is elected.
Is that true? I mean, is that necessarily demonstrably true, do you think?
Look, first of all, let me say, far from going for the jugular, he's gone for the gutter. I mean, what this was a verbalisation of that video we've seen on Twitter where they write "welcome" in the sand and roll out the red carpet. It's disgusting. It's actually beneath the Prime Minister to talk about people who are crossing the Channel in the most desperate circumstances in the terms that he has. Now, he's now accusing Labour of letting 65% of the people who come here stay. Hang on a second, if we want to get into the gutter and have that fight there, the Prime Minister's record is 100% of people coming, staying. This is a really serious issue that doesn't require to be bottled down into little sound bites for the Sun like that. Labour have a plan. Yvette Cooper's never off the radio talking about her plan. You might question the efficacy of that. We won't know until it's in place, in truth. But I do think it's a comprehensive plan, and it starts with more border force agencies. It requires more people to be processing asylum claims. It requires better relationships with the French. It's not enough to say Labour's plan will make this worse.
No. I guess the problem for Labour is that last point's a really interesting one, because when that plan was devised, Macron was looking relatively powerful, and maybe Lamy's got good relationships with the Macron team, and he was seen as an advantage. Lamy's got some good contacts. He'll be a real asset when it comes to the Foreign Office. But if National Rally dominate French politics at the next election, that pillar of the Labour plan, having good relationships with French, making that relationship work, that is imperiled, isn't it, Kezia? That feels like a real risk that's coming down the road for Keir Starmer potentially in the next month or so.
It's potentially an enormous twist in the story, but that's a big if, that Le Pen's party will do well in the elections in France. The presidential race is a different beast from the national parliamentary elections, and I think we need to wait to see that pan out.
William, you have experience with this. It's not in the French... I mean, if Le Pen is pulling the strings of French politics, she'll want people leaving French soil and going onto British soil. She will not be willing to stop the boats in that sense, you wouldn't have thought. And that's always struck me as a bit of self-interest for the French anyway. How easy is it to get a better relationship with the French, get a better deal there? Because that's one of the promises that all parties make. Keir Starmer's made it probably more strongly than the rest, and it never necessarily seems to come to fruition.
Well, it's difficult. We do, of course, pay the French government to do a lot of work on the beaches, arresting criminal gangs and so on. So there's a pretty constructive relationship between the UK and France. Again, it's not easy to do because it's a long, complex coastline. But so the good relations, though, are there. I think you're right, though, that what looks like it's about to happen in France is going to complicate all that, again, for any British government, because it seems very unlikely, whoever wins the French elections, that President Macron's party will win a majority. So you're going to have a government in France that's jostling for position against the president of France and trying to win the presidency in 3 years' time. They're not going to help him out in most things that he's trying to do, and they're not particularly going to help out other countries on migration any more than today, because they want to have just their own hardline immigration policy, quite nationalistic way. So this does make it even harder, and there's going to be probably a new French government on July the 8th, just as there might be, if polls are correct, a new British government on July the 5th. So this is all going to happen together.
Sue's got in touch. The Conservatives claim that every proposal put forward by Labour stopping the boats they are already doing. Presumably, these operations will continue during a transfer to a Labour government. We're going through the stories of the day with Kezia Dugdale and William Hague. Now, Labour has committed in its manifesto to ban conversion therapy. That is when someone tries to persuade someone who's gay or trans not to be. It's something Conservative governments have tried to do, but they failed because of concerns that parents or well-meaning therapists might fall foul of the law. The Times reports that the party, that Labour, will try to come up with a law in the first 100 days. And Labour's Nick Thomas-Symonds told us this.
Conversion practices, which are deliberately and coercively trying to change or suppress someone's sexual or gender identity, is abhorrent, and it does a great deal of damage to people. But it will be designed to deal with that deliberate and coercive behaviour, which is so damaging.
Kezia Dugdale, is it possible to come up with a law in 100 days that the Conservatives spent more than 100 days trying to do?
I think so, yes, because there's a prescription for it already. A former Labour backbencher put together a private member's bill to do that. So there is a set of text. Let's remind ourselves that the first person to propose this was Theresa May. It shouldn't be particularly controversial.
A long time ago. 2018,
I think it was. And what we're talking about here is the idea that somebody could seek to cure a young person of their sexuality. That is horrendous. And look at how that was proposed to be done. We're talking exorcisms, we're talking purity pills, we're talking about young people being surrounded by people praying in circles as if the prayer itself would lift their gayness from them. To a gay person, I cannot believe it's still legal now. I can't believe this hasn't been resolved yet. That said, this does get more complicated when you move from the issue around sexuality to the issue of gender. And it will be very difficult to legislate for, because what we're talking here is about creating environments where serious people can have conversations with young people about their gender and ask them questions and listen to what they've got to say. And the consequence of those conversations could lead to a young person choosing to change their gender identity or not. That element of intent is very difficult to legislate for, to ban that. So the detail of this, it will be very, very important. But the concept of a ban is long, long overdue.
Yeah. Do you think then, I mean, you know that there are concerns around these what kind of so-called well-meaning conversations and whether they come within the remit of any law. Are you confident, as Labour seem to be, as Nick Thomas-Symonds seem to be, that you can create some kind of nuanced exceptions within the legislation so that those conversations are not caught?
I very much hope so. I think it's possible. I think this is the type of public policy we found relatively easy 10 years ago, before we became really polarised and really tribal and decided there was only ever two camps you could ever have on any issue. This is the purpose of being a legislator, is to examine the detail, go into consultation, line by line work out what the consequences of what you're doing is. And I think a grown-up government could do that.
William Hague, why do you think it's taken so long since Theresa May first mentioned it?
Because it is very complicated and difficult, and Kezia has just pointed out some of the difficulties. That's not to say it shouldn't have happened by now, and I think it's a good idea to legislate on this if this can be resolved. I wouldn't do this 100 days thing. I would, if I was the Labour Party, I'd be very careful about saying, well, we're going to sort all this out within 100 days, even though it hasn't been sorted out in the last 6 years. Because there is a real difficulty. Hilary Cass, who was very respected for her review on gender services for children, said in the interview she did a couple of months ago that it was beyond her to know how on earth to legislate for it, because of the problems of people just having a conversation with a young person that is, that's meant to be helpful. So it is very difficult. If you're going to do it in 100 days, you have to tell the person drafting that law basically in 2 days after the election what you want to do, and then you have to rush it through both houses of Parliament. So while this does need dealing with, it's really important not to do it in a tearing hurry in a new Parliament. So I would advise the Labour Party, if they're ever listening to my advice, not to say 100 days.
I also think that no one in the real world uses 100 days. It's not a British unit of measurement, is it?
Journalists do.
It's so mad, isn't it? No one else in their life goes,
first 100 days of government.
Yeah, what are you doing in 100 days' time? It doesn't even fit into months.
I can tell you when that was.
But yeah, what are we doing? Do we mean 3 months? Let's just say 3 months. That's the unit of time that we actually use in English. I find 100 days, it's a red flag to me, actually. As soon as someone starts talking about 100 days, you know something's up. Shall we talk about bets? The betting scandal, because it's still going on. We had talked to Michael Tomlinson about it as well. He said how angry he was. Rishi Sunak said how angry he was. William, were you surprised by it? Because this is the scandal of candidates and people connected to the Prime Minister in whatever way. We don't know how many, we don't know who it was, making a bet based on the fact that they knew when the election was. It's almost unbelievable, even in this catastrophic campaign, they could find something else to go wrong, but this has gone wrong. Were you surprised by it? Is it the sort of thing that goes on? What did you make of it?
I was very surprised by it, particularly because, not only is it totally ethically wrong, but it's so easily discovered as well. It's not... People used to walk into a betting shop with some cash, and get the ticket, and the betting shop would never know who they were. But we're in a different age of online gambling, and rules can be enforced more easily. But it's also totally unacceptable ethically and morally. So I was surprised by it, that Rishi Sunak and others are quite right to be angry about it. And an investigation is taking place. Well,
they're happy about that, aren't they? It couldn't be further in the long grass, could it? There's that beautiful piece of long grass, and that's where this has been kicked into.
Well, I don't know how long that grass... I've no idea whether...
Well, as long as it's longer than 9 days, that grass, everyone's a winner, aren't they? That's the point.
Yeah, although no one can really say it hasn't had enough attention in the election campaign. I mean, it really has, unfortunately, for the Conservatives, dominated a lot of the election campaign, and I think done a lot of damage. So I think it's fair enough now for all these other issues we've just been talking about to get their chance in the election campaign. But it's been very damaging.
Kezia, what do you make of it? Politicians betting, is that a common thing, do you think?
I think it's much more common than we're actually giving it credit for. I think there is, however, an important difference here. There's nothing inherently wrong with gambling, right? Well, it has to be a gamble, though. There has to be a risk that you're going to lose. And that's the issue at the heart of this story, is the people who knew the date of the election, put on a bet the day before it was called. There was no risk they were going to lose. They knew exactly what was happening. That's why it's insider trading. That's why it's illegal. That's the critical difference. I think politicians, political officials, people around political parties place little bets on all the time.
What sort of thing would be acceptable? Because there's an analogy to football, isn't it, or a sport generally, that if you play football, you shouldn't really bet on it. You shouldn't bet on your own league, and there are rules against that. What distinction would you draw? What should politicians be allowed to bet on?
So I think political actors study the form. That's what we do. It's every time we, read our political newsletter in the morning, read the newspapers, come and talk on programmes like this. It's all about studying the form, making estimations about what you think is going to happen. So I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with somebody who's very active in politics putting a bet on a seat. Person X is going to win seat Y.
Could they bet on themselves? So yeah, because they are betting on themselves to a certain extent by standing. So could you're standing in a seat? Can you bet on your victory?
Well,
chance?
I wouldn't advise them to. I don't think it's particularly smart. That's different from saying it's wrong or criminal or morally unjust. Do they have inside knowledge?
It's an interesting question, isn't
it? It's a fascinating question, actually. There's an awful lot of people who think they're going to win when they're not.
No,
right?
but they would have some knowledge other people didn't have, possibly as well, because they'll know how their own campaign's going. So maybe you shouldn't.
That's why they shouldn't do it.
Yeah, fine.
Right,
Settled there.
An agreement has broken out. Now, listen, just brace yourself for this, okay? I hope you're sitting down. Party leaders have told Radio Times about their favourite TV shows. Keir Starmer played it safe by saying Friday night dinner. Sir Ed Davies said that he usually watches TV with his kids. His son enjoys Mr. Tumble. Rishi Sunak raised some eyebrows by saying that he's recently enjoyed Bridgerton. Let's have a listen.
I am a gentleman. My father raised me to act with honour, but that honour is hanging by a thread that grows more precarious with every moment I spend in your presence. You are the bane of my existence. And the object of all my desires. Night and day, I dream of you.
Okay, that's too much, isn't it? It's too much for 9:29 on a Tuesday morning, I feel.
Wish you loved that bit.
Well, apparently. I mean, I wouldn't have put him down as a Bridgerton, but this is the problem with these questions, isn't it, Kezia? Because the minute you hear their choice, which, has been workshopped to death, you then start thinking, really? Can I imagine Rishi Sunak sitting down with his wife and not with kids, surely. They're too young to watch Bridgerton, because it is quite racy. It's a bit of a losing game, really, isn't it? This, don't you think?
Well, look, we say we want to know more about our politicians and treat them like normal people,
Yeah.
and then when they do something really normal, like tell us they watch Bridgerton, we're appalled.
But the thing is, do you think that he would have answered something different? Like, the Twix and the Haribo answer that he gave. That
and the Mexican
some people,
Coke.
Yeah, some people didn't like that. I liked it because it felt real, because it was something that he wasn't prepped for that question, was he? He just gave the answer, and I suppose I just like that more when it hasn't been thought about.
I feel like the truth from Rishi Sunak would have been, I love the cricket. That's the one thing I want to watch all day and all night.
And that's what
people
Michael
would do-
Tomlinson said. He said, I don't watch a lot of telly, I watch sport, I watch the cricket.
Yeah.
And you find that's almost certainly true.
And Bridgerton feels like, well, that's something I should say, because that's what the
Yeah.
whole country's doing just now.
Kezia, if you were the leader of Scottish Labour right now, how would you be answering the question? What do you watch on TV?
Well, so I was going to say, the thing you should do is be authentic and speak the
Yeah.
truth, right? So
Go on
I'm into watching The Walking Dead right now.
Oh,
So I'm a bit
okay.
of slasher movie is
Fair
doing
enough.
it for
If
me.
he'd said Walking Dead, though, can you imagine that?
I know, right?
I love The Walking Dead.
And this is why I'm out of politics.
Exactly. No. Well, we're very glad that you're out of politics, because you're here. William Hague, right, you are leader of the Conservative Party. Today, what's the thing you watch on TV?
Truly, I'm not the leader of the Conservative Party, thankfully, but what I watch on TV is Clarkson's Farm. I've been enjoying.
Oh, very good.
French Jeremy Clarkson's always good for a laugh. Drive to Survive is good every year. Very exciting, almost as cutthroat as politics. Game of Thrones has been my favorite in recent years.
That's quite fruity.
Politicians would hesitate to say that for obvious reasons, but that's been my all-time favorite in the last few years.
There you go.
Can I ask the
What have
question?
you done?
When he was asked that question, is there any chance he answered it honestly? Because the actual quote is,
Oh no! Please,
Come
I
on.
beg you.
in all the talent that we have in this country and fantastic period dramas like this showcase why this country stands as a creative industry superpower. Why couldn't he just say, I like watching, Neighbours or whatever it is? Do you think, who does he ask? Who do you ask in that situation, William? Do you have ask advisors?
Yeah, sometimes if advisors pick up before a big debate or interview like that you're going to be asked something, they will, say, well, you could say this, you could say that, you're going to offend that group, you're going to offend that, and you can get too much into that way of thinking, of course. But actually, in this case, it's probably entirely true that he watches Bridgerton. I don't know. I know Rishi Sunak, but I don't go around and watch Netflix.
You don't go watch Bridgerton with him?
Oh,
All back to mine for Bridgerton.
that would be a scoop.
Probably gave a true answer there. But he, of course, then you want to... a politician running for election is bound to say, well, all these wonderful people work in this great industry. You're almost programmed to say that.
yes. You need to be deprogrammed. That's what I think.
See, even Ed Davey, I really thought Ed Davey was very genuine, but this feels manipulated because he basically, yes, that's what his favourite TV programme is, and so he says a children's TV programme so he can emphasise the whole story around himself.
Although maybe that's the only thing he can remember. It's like we were watching Peppa Pig with our kids. That's all we could think about for decades was Peppa Pig, Peppa Pig, Peppa Pig.
It just feels cynical. It feels cynical to me.
Oh, you're too cynical.
Yeah, maybe I am. Theresa May was awful at this. Like, do you remember she would ask, what do you like? Do you like, coffee or tea? I'm not entirely sure. refuse to hold a position. I just want honesty. Naked attraction.
That's what you think she watched?
Yeah, that's her favourite.
William, have you seen Naked Attraction?
No.
Okay.
I want you to explain
Maybe
it.
just Google it. No, I refuse.
William,
I'm
it sounds
sorry.
Very interesting.
It's blind date with no clothes on. I just leave that image there in your mind.
He's taking his glasses off.
I thought you were going to play it.
Yeah. It's really wasted on radio, if I'm absolutely brutally honest. We better leave it there. We're going to get shouted at as ever. Always good to speak to you. Kezia Dugdale in the studio. William Hague, thank you both very much indeed. Wonderful stuff. Matt Chorley's here from 10 o'clock. It's How to Win an Election Day. Peter Mandelson, Polly Mackenzie and Daniel Finkelstein will be giving you some more political analysis. Before that, we're going to speak with James Ball. He worked with WikiLeaks and lived with Julian Assange. What was that like? Is this justice? Has justice been served for Julian Assange? We'll try and get to the bottom of that after the news with Stuart Wilson.